Hello, Greg. I'm going to base most of this on a narrative, just a sort of free-flow narrative from my head, somewhat. Not altogether, though. But starting off with the idea that what I'm trying to see here is how to include the idea of tacit knowledge in anything I do. And that would be, for me, something that would happen after the student can show a little experience in that area, therefore they picked up the knowledge and now they don't even have to think about it. That's how I look at tacit knowledge. In part, that's how I look at it. There's more to it, so that's just one part. So in this case, I'm interpreting tacit knowledge to be that they're going to have to figure out how to get something done, basically. So over time, and the next time they do it, they'll have a little bit of a background. Eventually, it'll become natural for them to do. However, that doesn't mean I'm going to always leave them on their own. I've got to give them guidance and sometimes the actual facts so that they can work with them. Having said all that, the end game is that they will be able to go out there anywhere and know that they can find out something on their own, that eventually they'll get so used to doing that they'll make greater connections that they didn't really plan on making or they weren't trained to make. Furthermore, each student will develop and progress at their own pace, so that has to be part of it too. It's not the pace, it's not that problem, it's not how well they use the strategies, it's not if they use the strategies I would use and all that, it's if they can make the connections, which is not very different from what I do now. Basically, I need for them to make a good analysis and then back it up with evidence, even if it's not the analysis I expected of them, as long as they can back it up with evidence. Even if they fail to back it up with good evidence, at least they've tried and we can work from there. That would be also tacit knowledge, to understand when evidence is good and not. This is where it starts with the tacit learning, but you have to have it. Actually, I'm sorry, it doesn't start with the tacit learning. It leads up to the tacit learning, but you have to have a plan as to what to do. So you're asked the question, Greg, you asked the question, start with an existing activity and design it to incorporate the principles and concepts explored in the course. So I'm not going to try, although I might naturally do it, I'm not going to try and tell you what parts of the bullets I'm going for. You can decide for yourself. But basically what I'm going to tell you is this. Eventually, the student will introduce himself or herself to the process of coming up with original thought, which may or may not be original, but it's original to them. And eventually, they will come to be the unconscious, competent individual. Fluency being a key component to mastery in this case. This is my only notes, the notes that I was working from right here. That's as much as I wrote, and I took the rest, almost all the rest. No, actually, the rest from my head. Anyway, the first thing I asked myself is, what am I doing now? And one of the main things I'm doing is, as an English teacher, we're reading stories, and I'm using an app called Subtext, which I like more than most people. I just like it, and I want to keep using it. And I was thinking about how can I use it even better. So what I'm doing now is I'm grabbing these books online and getting a digital version of the book and sharing it by making groups and giving each group a code. Once they have the code, they're in the group. For example, right now we are reading To Kill a Mockingbird. During the story, what I'm doing is I'm creating what I'm calling purple prompts. So as they're reading, they all see these. Everybody in the group who's I've shared this prompt with can see this prompt. I've highlighted it purple so they can't miss it, and they go to the sideline and they answer a question. In this case, the post-discussion for me would focus on the implications of that last part that I squared and read. So the students would open it up and answer the question, which was on the last slide. No, I'm sorry, it wasn't on the last slide. What it basically said is, what is she referring to? Now, my answer would have been the ones that are on here. As you can see, we have students answering. I've blocked them out. I've blocked out their names, but they may answered on May 14th. And they're well within what I was expecting. You see the little pen there, I can edit, I can respond to them individually, but they can also go back and respond to each other. It's something I've been trying to work on. However, really one of the beauties of this thing is that I will get responses I didn't even think about, and they're great discussion pieces. Like, for instance, these here, in particular, the first, second, and fourth one, took a different tact as to why she would say, "See, I told you so." And it's very interesting to see which one is in the forefront in the story, in our minds, and it's a great round table discussion, which I call round ball toss, because we do what I used to do in Project Adventure and such. Works very well. Could be better, but it works well. But this process, which I have just briefly laid out to you, doesn't get into the idea of tacit knowledge as much as I'd want. Now, the personal experience we're having is reading a story, responding to certain things, getting into it in more depth, seeing how other people respond, maybe be able to respond to their response. All those are good for their academic future and maybe in business, because the more they're used to that kind of methodology, the more it will become natural. They won't even have to think about it, because to me that is tacit knowledge. Furthermore, they get to the point where I'm trying to get them to ask the questions where they could actually create their own prompts. Then it becomes complex. However, that's a good thing. It's a good thing. That's where I should start, with the complexity. No, I take that back. I shouldn't start with the complexity, but it should be in my mind from the beginning. So in order to see how I can evolve this use of this app and this process, is I look into what some of the things that we read, two of them being this, that basically you can't include family and what's going on, which I've tried to do. I've actually offered the code to parents, and some of them seemed enthusiastic about it, but none have done it yet. Not yet. The other part is obviously what's on the bottom, connect with another school. Now these are two things that I can continue to work with. So here's the ideas. We've talked about what I do now with the subtext groups, same prompts in each group. You know, a little back and forth right here. And the purpose for me has always been to make sure if everybody's up to speed on the story, and with everyone else at the same place. And also, as my chicken scratch shows you, that the comprehension is good, because I don't want them to be misunderstanding something. For example, in the past, Tim Johnson the dog and Tom Robinson, the accused man in the story, the kids have mixed up their names. But that's really not the comprehension I'm talking about. I'm talking about like the thing that you saw before, about how they understood what Alexander was saying, and much more. And then finally, as always, when it comes to what's important to the English class, is try to create an analysis and back it up with evidence. Can you do that? Is your ability to do that improving? However, what does that have to do with this? It is, what if I could try to add joining up with another school, sharing prompts with the school, sharing prompts with parents, what I've tried, using back and forth and responses with the other school. In other words, what I'm saying is, find a school that, I don't care if it's a high school, that is teaching To Kill a Mockingbird, hook up with a class that's willing to do this, because it doesn't have to be real time. I mean, because it could be, you know what I'm saying, I hope. And have my students be in the same groups as theirs, and seeing what the back and forth would be. You could take it to a further, you know, a back and forth once, then a back and forth twice. It depends on the motivation and the time. Also, when it comes to maybe not everybody be reading at the same pace, I would try to teach to a concept which could be added on to. For instance, in To Kill a Mockingbird, you can talk about innocence, courage, and benevolence, and use those concepts, and however far they've gotten, that's what they can use, and not whether they have read to a certain point. So that could be a way to introduce the story. You could also do spiral review using the prompts, going back to the past and talking about a prompt and connecting it to the future. There's a certain point where they talk about how it's, thank you, buddy, how it's good to, sometimes it's okay to do a white lie. Well, at the end of the story, that becomes a big part. There's also a part where Atticus talks about the truth and how important it is to him. In the end of the story, it becomes a dilemma for him. Nani? Oh, you turned it on, buddy. Hold on. Okay, sorry about that, Greg. That's my man, my little man. He's with me while baby girl is out shopping with mom. Anyway, where was I? So there's many things that you could try to do to get this done. Maybe start a blog chat with the other class and run. Maybe you could have the students run one. You could do FaceTime with other schools. You could Skype. You could do that with other schools or with a quote unquote expert if you can connect with an expert. And there are other things you could do. You could find wiki sites that have information on the topic and break down the wiki site the way that Dana Boyd said you can, which is quite interesting to me. However, there could be another step too. That being, and this is what I would have ultimately, my goal would be, is to have the students do the work. Find the blog, find something, go to email someone, email school, write a letter to a school or a person or a contact, set up the whole process themselves of making the connections, come up with their own, code for an own group that, obviously I could see. Do all these things. There's so many ways to contact, and this is what's important to me, and document the process, the successes, the failures, the plans, everything about it. Make an iMovie out of the documented process. Make another created or any creative activity or product from the work that they do make based on this process. To me, that would be it. I am very much into the idea of them documenting what they're doing from back and forth and becoming more and more familiar with the process, which leads right back to the idea of tacit knowledge. And by that, I mean, I'm not putting down the knowledge base at all, but for this particular way of looking at it, what Juarez Correa said is this: I am more interested in what my students can do. That's what I'm interested in. That's why I want them to try it on their own. However, obviously I would be there to give them suggestions, lead them toward the right path, but I want them to come up with their own way of doing it, eventually come up with their own ideas. I'm sure they can come up with ideas I haven't thought about, and I will learn from that. But eventually it's not only what they know for me. The thing that I am most interested in that keeps me going is what they can do.